Thursday, a couple of weeks ago, was probably the busiest day that we'll have this year at Oklahoma Gardening. We had several volunteers and students out here helping us plant our biggest planting ever, over 150 flats of bedding plants. Now, if you keep up with us here on Oklahoma Gardening, you know that education is a driving force behind our Oklahoma Cooperative Extension produced TV program. Now, obviously, that is achieved through our weekly programming segments, but it's also accomplished here at our studio gardens, where we give many tours to visitors who can actually see the examples of what we talk about each week. Well, this year we've added a third component to our educational efforts, that of involving the horticulture and landscape architecture students from here on the OSU campus in Stillwater. Assisting in this project is Doug Needham, assistant professor and instructor of some of the horticulture classes here at OSU. Now, Doug gives us a great overview of this unique partnership.
The class that did the project is Herbaceous Ornamental Plants, which is Horticulture 2212 here at OSU. And it was designed as a method of incorporating some cooperative learning for the students, where they could participate as a team, having this group effort in decision making as to what kind of plants should go into the garden, what the particular garden design would be, and so forth. The class is composed of about 25 students, pretty much 50% horticulture, 50% landscape architecture, or landscape contracting students. The project was designed as a cooperative learning effort, and Oklahoma Gardening offered 5 of its gardens to be available to my students to do the design work. They had an edible garden, an everlasting garden, annual garden, barn garden, and a formal herb garden, allowing the students to choose which particular garden they'd like to work on, hopefully having a special interest in one of those topics. One of the main goals, which I think is probably not readily apparent to the students, is cooperative learning. It's a new method of learning how to work toward a common goal as a whole, as a group, much like what we do when we're out in the real world, as the students say, in our careers, learning how to work with one another to reach this common goal. And that's really what this project was all about. It allowed them to work together, maybe a couple of the members on the team having special expertise in garden design, another 2 of them maybe had special expertise in writing a handout. So one of the components of this project was to write a cultural or historical handout that could be used then at Oklahoma Gardening and given out to visitors in the garden. All of the garden design was performed in our computer laboratory, so that they gained experience using CAD software on the computers, designing the gardens, and this required quite a bit of effort. We would meet for maybe an hour and a half in the lab during class time. The rest of that time they needed to spend on their own, hopefully with the other team members, evenings or weekends, getting together and bouncing some ideas around and seeing how it looked on the computer's monitor as far as color coordination and color schemes. And then eventually building the cultural handout, as well as a spreadsheet that would list all the plants used, quantities, and prices. With a cooperative learning effort, it's always difficult getting each person to contribute. But yes, I think they did well in the end. I'm pleased with the projects. It's exciting to see them excited about coming out and planting the gardens and having participated in Oklahoma Gardening.
Our first student project we want to highlight is what we refer to as our formal gardens, where we use raised beds constructed of landscape timbers set in a unique formal pattern. Now, Katie Coburn of Muskogee, Oklahoma, and horticulture student, outlines what their group came up with.
Our garden was the formal herb garden. We started out with a lot of herbs, but we wanted to incorporate it in a knot garden to make it more of a formal, but still something that you could have in a plain Oklahoma garden. It didn't have to be a palace or anything. So we decided to have a small knot garden and incorporate a lot of herbs and low creeping plants. The formal garden is called a formal garden because of the geometric shapes and interweaving of different plants and essentially creating a knot effect, really complex, not as hard to draw out as it may seem, but when the plants are grown, the full effect is a very, very tight and very complex pattern of circles and diamonds and all fit into one small space to make it very compact and very neat to look at. We had a problem working with the L-shaped beds as a knot garden. It's a lot easier to work in a square. So we started out with the topiary roses that will be, I think, 18 inches. And then we just decided to weave in and out with the germander and the dwarf lavender, and that will make a neat effect, and they cross over too. And so it's not essentially a true knot garden, but still it does have a geometric pattern, and it will be similar on both sides and have a mirror effect. We took into consideration the overall color of the OBGA gardens this year is the pastel color, so we tried to stay away mainly from the brights, using a lot of purple, and we have a lot of green because of the Santa Lina gray and green, very light colors. So we stayed mostly with the pinks and light yellows and whites. This bed right here already was filled with herbs. It has lots of garlic and tons of herbs. So we pretty much left this bed alone except for going ahead and incorporating the Santa Lina border all the way around just to tie it in with the entire garden. The middle bed right here was the most fun to work on. It has the dwarf Chinese elm. We needed to keep that there, and that's such a small tree that we needed everything to be very low and compact. And so then we just looked in pictures of knot gardens and incorporated our own, made our own design. It's a lot simpler than most of them are, but we still think it's going to be neat. This bed here had a lot of roses already in it, so we really didn't have to do much with that. And this bed mirrors this bed exactly. We thought that'd be a neat effect to have it. That's the more formal aspect. And another thing we've added in the paving stones, we've put a little creeping thyme in each, so when your foot brushes over it, the scent is released and everything. Working on this garden, I did learn a lot of new landscape architecture techniques. I had mainly just known what the plants were and stuff, and having to work on the computers and in the computer lab in the Ag Hall, I learned a lot on how to plot gardens and print them out and all that really technical stuff that I had never been exposed to. And I think the landscape architecture members of our group really learned a lot more about the horticulture aspect and that area, instead of just mainly working on a list of plants they were given and they have to arrange them. They had to research and find out what the plants were and how they grew in their habit and everything before they were able to plot. Our team members for the Herb Knot Garden were Carol Cross, Leanne Newell, Jean McMullen, Scott Palmer, Bill Oldle, and myself. And we all pretty much worked together on the research, but Bill and Scott were in charge of the plotting and the landscape architecture. The rest of us are horticulture majors, and we all worked together on choosing our plants and the research and putting all of it together.
We want to thank all of the students involved in the formal garden project. We're really anxious to see how it turns out this summer. And of course, a garden of this type is very high in maintenance, but at the same time, it affords us many segments that we can share with you throughout the upcoming season. Now, during the next few weeks, we'll also be sharing with you the other student projects, which will include an edible landscape, an everlasting garden, and some more annual flower beds, so we hope you'll stay tuned.